We now enter the period of cross-examination, which trial-like allows the questioner to pose and the answer only to answer and not to repeat the question or to dodge. 6 minutes of questions begin to Dr. Craig, followed by 6 minutes of questions to Mr. Hitchens. Dr. Craig, your questions for Mr. Hitchens.
All right. Let's talk first about whether there are any good arguments to think that atheism is true. Now, it seems to me that you're rather ambivalent here, that you say, you redefine atheism to mean a sort of atheism or non-theism.
That's what it means.
But how do you distinguish then the different varieties of non-theism? For example, what is normally called atheism, agnosticism, or the view of verificationists that the statement God exists is simply meaningless?
Well, I mean, there are different schools of atheism, as you say, but there's no claim I know how to make that says atheism is true, because atheism is the statement that a certain proposition isn't true. So I wish you'd get this bit right, because there you go again.
Well,
I just devoted a little time to this. I said it is not in itself a belief or a system. It simply says you can get by better, probably, we think, without the assumption that no one who wants you to worship a God has ever been able to come up with a good enough reason to make you do it.
Now, so the point is, though, that on your definition of atheism or non-theism, it really embodies a diversity of views, such as agnosticism, what is normally called atheism, or this verificationism. Now, which of those do you hold to within this umbrella of atheism? Are you an atheist who asserts the proposition God does not exist, or do you simply withhold belief in God in the way the agnostic does?
Right. On some days, I'm a greater. No, I'm not going to do you that much of a favor. On some days, I'm a great admirer of Thomas Huxley, who had the great debate with Bishop Wilberforce in Oxford at the Natural History Museum about Darwinism in the mid-19th century, and who was known as Darwin's bulldog. We would now say Darwin's pit bull, and who completely trounced the good bishop. But I can't thank him for inventing the term agnostic. And I can't thank him for some of his social Darwinist positions either, some of which are rather
unattractive. I need an answer to this. My time is fleeting.
Because I think agnosticism is evasive. To me, yes, if you talk about the power of the Holy Spirit and so forth, to me, that is meaningless. It's to me, I'm sorry, I've tried. It's white noise. It's like saying there is only one God and Allah is his messenger. It's gibberish to me. There are many of us, I'm sorry, there are just many of us of whom this is the case. It may be true, it is true.
Okay, Mr. Hitchens, I got to press you here, because time is leaving.
Feel free.
What is your view exactly?
Press away.
Do you affirm God does not exist, or do you simply withhold belief?
I think once I have said that I've never seen any persuasive evidence for the existence of something, and I've made real attempts to study the evidence presented and the arguments presented, that I will go as far as to say, have the nerve to say, that it does not therefore exist, except in the minds of its, except in the Henry Jamesian subjective sense that you say of it being so real to some people in their own minds that it counts as a force in the world. Yes.
Okay, so you do affirm then that God does not exist. Now, what I want to know, and do you have any justification for that?
I think I've come unwired in some horrible way.
You're fine.
Are you sure?
Do you have any arguments leading to the conclusion that God does not exist?
Well, I would rather. I think I'm wondering if I'm boring anybody now. I would rather say. I'd rather state it in reverse and say I find all the arguments in favour to be fallacious or unconvincing. And I'd have to add that though this isn't my reason for not believing in it, that I would be very depressed if it was true. But that's a quite different thing. I don't say of atheism that it's at all morally superior. That would be very risky. I wouldn't admit that it was at all morally inferior either, but we can at least be acquitted on the charge of wishful thinking.
I wonder if that's the case. Would you agree that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence?
Well, you know, I'm not sure that I would agree.
Okay. Let's turn to
No,
the
I mean,
moral
I
argument and
think-
talk about that a little bit. I think you've misunderstood the moral argument.
Given the stakes, Doctor, sorry, given the stakes, I mean, you're not saying, we're not talking about unicorns or tooth fairies or leprechauns here. We're talking about an authority that would give other human beings the right to tell me what to do in the name of God. So for a claim like that, if there's no evidence for it, it seems to me not a small question.
No, it's certainly not a small question. But
Because you're
I
making a
wonder if that
very,
makes
very, very large claim. Your evidence had better be absolutely magnificent, it seems to me. And it's the lack of magnificence, I think, that began to strike me first.
One final question, Doctor.
Okay, well, let's go to the moral argument. It seems to me there that you've misunderstood the argument in that we're looking for an objective foundation for the moral values and duties that we both, I think, want to affirm. It's not a matter of whether or not we can know what is right and wrong, or that we need God to tell us what is right and wrong. It's rather that we need to have some sort of an objective foundation for right and wrong. Wouldn't you agree, on your view, it's simply the sociobiological spin-offs of the evolutionary process, and that therefore these do not provide any sort of objective foundation for moral values and duties?
That could be true, yes. That
Okay.
could well be true. Yeah, I don't want to be too much of a reductionist, but it's entirely possible that it is purely evolutionary and functional. One wants to think that there's a bit more to one's love for the fellow creature than that. But it doesn't add one iota of weight or moral gravity to the argument to say, but that's because I don't believe in a supernatural being. It's a non sequitur.
Mr. Hitchens, your questions for Dr. Craig.
Well, I'd like to know first, you said that the career of Jesus of Nazareth involved a ministry of miracles and exorcisms. When you say exorcism, do you mean that you believe in devils too?
What I meant there was that most historians agree that Jesus of Nazareth practiced miracle working and he practiced exorcisms. I'm not committing myself, nor are historians committing themselves to the reality of demons, but they are saying that Jesus did practice exorcism and he practiced healing.
So you believe that Jesus of Nazareth caused devils to leave the body of a madman and go into a flock of pigs that hurled themselves down the Gadarene slopes into the sea?
Do I believe that's historical? Yes.
Right. That would be sorcery, wouldn't it, though?
No, it would be an illustration of Jesus' ability to command even the forces of darkness, and therefore an illustration of the sort of divine authority that he was able to command and exercise. This, as I say, is illustrative of this unprecedented sense of divine authority that Jesus of Nazareth had, that he even could command the forces of darkness and that they would obey. So whether you think he was a genuine exorcist or that he merely believed himself to be an exorcist, what is historically undeniable is that he had this radical sense of divine authority, which he expressed by miracle working and exorcisms.
Right. And you believe he was born of a virgin?
Yes, I believe that as a Christian. I couldn't claim to prove that historically. That's not part of my case tonight. But I as a Christian, I believe that.
And I know you believe in the resurrection, but
yes, and for that I think that we have good evidence.
As a matter of biblical, what shall we call it, consistency, it's said in one of the Gospels that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves of Jerusalem were opened, and all the tenants of the graves walked the streets and greeted their old friends. It makes the resurrection sound rather a commonplace in the greater Jerusalem area.
It says, that's in the Gospel of Matthew, and that's actually attached to a crucifixion narrative.
That's what I said. It says at the time of the crucifixion.
Yes, that's right. At the time of the crucifixion, it says that there were appearances of Old Testament saints in Jerusalem at the time. This is part of Matthew's description of the crucifixion scene.
Do you believe that?
I don't know whether Matthew intends this to be apocalyptic imagery or whether he means this to be taken literally. I've not studied it in any depth, and I'm open-minded about it. I'm willing to be convinced one way or the other.
You see, the reason I'm pressing you is this because, we know from Scripture that the pharaohs, the magicians, could produce miracles. In the end, Aaron could outproduce them. But what I'm suggesting to you is even if the laws of nature can be suspended and great miracles can be performed, it doesn't prove the truth of the doctrine of the person who's performing them. Or would you not agree to that?
Not necessarily. I think that's right.
So somebody could be casting out devils from pigs, and that wouldn't prove he was the Son of God.
I think that's right. In fact, there were Jewish exorcists. The only point that I was trying to make there was that this was illustrative of the kind of divine authority that Jesus claimed, especially since he didn't cast them out in God's name, or he didn't perform miracles by praying to God. He would do them in his own authority. So that Jesus exercised an authority that was simply unheard of at that time, and for which he was eventually crucified because it was thought to be blasphemous.
Well, it was thought to be blasphemous to claim to be the Messiah, to be exact. I mean, the people who got the closest look at him, the Jewish Sanhedrin, thought that his claims were not genuine. So remember, if you're resting anything on eyewitnesses, the ones who we definitely know were there thought he was bogus. But, okay, I think I've got a rough idea, assuming you make that assumption of his pre-existing divinity, that it's a presuppositionalist case, I can see what you're driving at.
Well, no, I'm not
I've got another question for you, which is this. How many religions in the world do you believe to be false?
I don't know how many religions in the world there are, so I
Well,
get
could
it.
you name... Right. Fair enough. I'll see if I can't narrow that down. That was a clumsily asked question, I admit. Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false?
Excuse me?
Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false preaching?
Yes, I think, yeah, certainly.
Would you name one then?
Islam.
That's quite a lot.
Pardon me?
That's quite a lot.
Yes.
Do you think it's moral to preach false religion?
No.
So religion is responsible for quite a lot of wickedness in the world right there.
Certainly.
Right.
I'd be happy to concede that. I would agree with that.
So if I was a baby being born in Saudi Arabia today, would you rather I was me or a Wahhabi Muslim?
Would I be? You'd rather be what?
Would you rather it was me? It was an atheist baby or a Wahhabi baby?
I don't have any preference as to whether you would.
Very good. As bad as that. Okay. Are there any? I've only got a few seconds. It's a serious question. I shouldn't squander it. Are there any Christian denominations you regard as false?
Certainly.
Could I know what they are?
Well, I am not a Calvinist, for example. I think that certain tenets of Reformed theology are incorrect. I would be more in the Wesleyan camp myself. But these are differences among brethren. These are not differences on which we need to put one another in some sort of a cage. So within the Christian camp, there's a large diversity of perspectives. I'm sure there are views that I hold that are probably false. But I'm trying my best to get my theology straight, trying to do the best job, but I think all of us would recognize that none of us agree on every point of Christian doctrine, on every dot and tittle.
Before Mr. Hitchens succeeds in launching another series of religious wars among Christians, let's get to the responses. 7 minutes are each. Dr. Craig, it is your 7 minutes.
Okay.